Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Artsbeat TV and radio here on 89.5 FM WSKB and Westfield's Community Programming Channel 15. I'm your host, Mark Auerbach, in Studio 120 at Westfield Technical Academy. Peter Coles is our chief engineer. Our first guest this morning is Howard Sherman, who is a longtime theater administrator who some of you may remember over the years when he worked at Hartford Stage and Goodspeed. He went on to a great career and has published his first major book, which is about Thornton Wilder's play Our Town. And it's funny, Howard, first of all, it's great to see you. But
nice to see you, Mark.
On our program last week, I was interviewing Kate Mcguire from Berkshire Theater Group, and I asked her what plays were on her mind, and she said that she had just finished rereading Our Town, and it really consumed her. And I thought after we had this conversation, and I didn't tell her that you were coming on the show the following week, but I realized that Our Town is a major American play that most of us have either seen or read or done in high school. And it's one play that stays on everybody's radar year after year after year. So you went and kind of researched why this play, written by Thornton Wilder, had such an impact over the years. And I guess to American theater, it's sort of like Fiddler on the Roof might be to a Broadway musical, that it remains timeless. It can be done in any language, in any culture, in any country, whether it's professional theater, community theater, school theater, and it has an impact. What introduced you to Our Town?
Well, I have to say, I'm somewhat contrary to what you were saying. I discovered pretty quickly that there are plenty of people, as pervasive as the play has been since it was written and premiered back in 1938. I was one of those people who didn't ever do the show. It wasn't done at my high school. It wasn't on the curriculum. And I didn't actually see the show for the first time till I was in my mid-20s. And I thought, okay, well, that's a nice play, but it didn't hit me the way it has much more into adulthood. So when you say research, what it really was predominantly was conversations with people who've done the play, because outside of an author, and of course, Thornton Wilder is no longer available to us, having passed away in 1975, other than the writer, who often knows the play best? Well, it's people who direct it and people who appear in it. So I just got a range of thought from people about the phrase I like to use, what it was to live in Grover's Corners 8 times a week for at least a few weeks on end. And so the discovery was that no, it's not as pervasive as everybody likes to think it is. And in fact, that a lot of people have opinions and impressions of this play without ever having seen it. And some people who may have seen it once long ago have actually forgotten what it's all about.
It's funny. I never saw it in high school. I don't think I saw it until I was in my 30s when I saw it. I knew who Thornton Wilder was. He was for those of you that don't, he was a Pulitzer Prize-winning author and playwright who wrote not only Our Town, but The Skin of Our Teeth. He wrote a play based on a European play, and it was called The Merchant of Yonkers, which he then rewrote as The Matchmaker, which became the basis for Hello, Dolly. But the Thornton Wilder that I read was a novel called The Bridge at San Luis Rey, which was a bridge over a precipice and a chasm, I guess in Peru, where 5 people unrelated are walking across this bridge, and it collapses, and it's the story of their lives. And that was required reading for us in like 8th grade. I guess Our Town had been around, but once I saw it, I never forgot it. It's not a play that is regularly performed in the circles that I hang out in, but it's one that left a indelible imprint on me of an American play. And I think for a lot of people, if you ask somebody about a famous American play, they're likely to talk about Our Town, at least from my perspective. How did you, what resonated about you to want to do a book about Our Town and Thornton Wilder and the people that had been involved in it?
Well, to be very clear, this isn't a book about Thornton Wilder. When I was approached to and asked by an editor at Methuen Drama if I had ever thought about doing a book, the famous quote that, of course, many of us long for, I had to think about ideas. And this came into my head. I'd written for American Theater Magazine a piece in 2018 about a group of our towns that all came at the same time the prior year. I had written just on my website about the experience of seeing the play at Sing Sing Correctional Facility in 2013. And so it just sort of rose up and I said, what about our town? And I did some very cursory research, mostly Google and Amazon. And what I found was there are a lot of books about Thornton Wilder. I wasn't finding books about our town. So what I really set out to do was to say, Thornton Wilder's covered. There are a number of biographies, the most recent and most complete being Penelope Niven's from 2012, 2013. And so I didn't need to tread that same ground. It had been done well. And in many ways, I thought, what if I do a biography of our town? That was sort of the initial thought. And once first I discovered that there weren't books, I really thought, oh, this is a great idea. And surely someone's had this idea before. And then I refined it because trying to do the history of a play that's been around for 83 years is widely believed to be one of the most produced American plays ever, both certainly in the US and widely around the world, that I narrowed down to saying, what if I just look at a dozen productions and see what the experiences for the people who made those productions were? And there were certain productions that immediately came to mind. I knew I had to do the last Broadway production with Paul Newman. I knew that I had to do David Cromer's version, which played in 6 cities between 2008 and 2014. But again, to narrow the focus, I limited myself to the 21st century. It was really all of 19 years, because again, if I was choosing from a wider aperture, it would just be that much more difficult. So it was a question of what I felt I was capable of doing and what I could do that would make sense, especially if I wasn't trying to cover the waterfront.
A question for you. You had, prior to writing this book, in your role as an arts administrator, had written press releases and grants, and then you became a columnist and wrote a lot of theater works. Writing a book is a different skill set. How difficult was it for you to sit down and write the book?
Massively difficult. I've taken to saying, I started this thinking, well, gee, I've read a lot of books. Surely I understand how to write one. And it turns out I should have found some version of The Idiot's Guide to Writing Nonfiction, because it took me a lot of discovery to figure out what shape the book would take, so that it didn't end up being multiple chapters of people telling the same thing over and over again. Wilder was not shy about saying very explicitly in the play what people should think, what they should come away with. And 11 days after it opened, he wrote a piece for the New York Times that made it even more explicit. This was not a play that needed to be mined literarily. And if its message is the same, how many people do you need talking about that message? What I discovered was that it was the journey to that message. that was interesting, and that I make very clear these aren't necessarily the best productions, the most famous productions. They are simply a range of productions, within each of which I was able to find, I hope, a unique story that simply made that experience, if not singular, representative of an approach. Certainly, a production done in a maximum security prison is fairly singular. A youth theater production is probably equivalent to countless youth theater and high school productions that have been done for literally decades. But again, it was going to be impossible to do all of them, and it would have taken forever to try to figure out some semblance of best. So these are 12 productions. I probably could have picked 12 other productions and found 12 other stories of that company's journey to Grover's Corners and to the messages of our town.
How long, Howard, how long from the time you started the book did it take you to complete it? And were you writing full time or were you doing other things in the course of the book?
Well, writing full time is probably a misnomer. I can't speak for any other authors. I'm new at this, but it's not that I sat at my desk from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. every day for a year. I did leave the job that I had. I did want to dedicate myself to this full time. I felt that that was the best way for me to focus and frankly to produce it in a timely basis. I didn't want to be one of those people who was working on a book in my odd hours and 5 years from now finally came out with a book, especially because I was trying to deal with a defined time frame. And if it took me 5 years, I would have been done and then had to think about other productions that had come along. I frankly did the first interviews for the book in actually just after I got the contract in February of 2019. And then basically panicked and was sort of overwhelmed by the project and would do an interview here or there, but I was not focused. And part of the big job of this, when you're trying to interview 100 and I think it's about 115 people, and we weren't in the pandemic, people weren't all home looking for something to do. I spent almost as much time, if not more, tracking down people and scheduling the interviews as I did actually talking to the people. But overall, the book took me, I got the contract in February of 2019, and I delivered the first draft in March of 2020.
And then
So
it just recently published.
came out in January of 2021. The final edit, proof, whatever you want to call it, was in October of 2020. So the weird experience for me, because all of my references to producing anything is producing theater, I've said that it was like we'd rehearsed a show and teched a show and then had to sit on our hands for 12 weeks waiting for opening night. It was very, very odd for me. And now that it's out in the world, obviously, I feel like it's opened, but I'm used to seeing 500 people sitting in a theater watching something I worked on. I am not looking over anyone's shoulder as they read the book, though that would actually probably be just as painful a process for me if I did it.
We're going to take a quick break to acknowledge the underwriters that make Artsbeat possible. But first of all, for those of you that want to get a copy of this book, it's called Another Day's Begun, Thornton Wilder's Our Town in the 21st Century. It's written by Howard Sherman, and you can find it wherever you look for your books. But Howard, you do have a website, correct, that people can go to?
Well, if they go to hesherman.com/anotherdaysbegun, they can go to more information about it, but that's not a sales spot. That's just informational. It has more writing about the play, some other people's writing, some articles that have come out about the book to buy the book. As you say, you go wherever books are sold.
Yeah, and I've seen it all over the web, so it is definitely you're able to purchase it in a variety of formats, the old-fashioned way of reading a book or electronically. We'll be back to chat more with Howard Sherman after these underwriting announcements. Peter Coles is our chief engineer. I'm Mark Auerbach. Don't go away.
Underwriting is brought to you by Boise Cascade Distribution, providing products and services needed for building material dealers, home improvement centers, and industrial customers. They offer everything from engineered wood and plywood to Drex decking and railing, James Hardie siding, and Advantech subfloor. Located at 33 Fowler Street Extension in Westfield and on the web at bc.com, they are committed to providing quality products, great service, convenience, and value.
Support for the community programming of WSKB is provided by the Barnes & Noble College Bookstore in the Ely Campus Center, offering Westfield State t-shirts, sweatshirts, and gift merchandise, all of your academic needs, and offering textbook materials in new, used, ebook, and rental formats. Available at the bookstore on campus or online at westfieldState.bncollege.com.
Hi, this is Harry Rock, host of Rock on Westfield every fourth Wednesday at 8 a.m. Tune in for my view of this place I call home.
Community Radio.
89.5 WSKB.
Live from Studio 120 at Westfield Technical Academy, this is WCPC Channel 15 and 89.5 FM, WSKB Westfield.
Welcome back to Artsbeat, everyone. I'm Mark Auerbach. Peter Coles is our chief engineer. Our guest this morning is Howard Sherman, the author. And if you've missed a part of this morning's program and want to catch the beginning of it, it's stored on YouTube at WSKB Community Radio's YouTube page, where you also find all of the past Artsbeat programs stored. So if you want to go back and catch something you may have heard here a year ago, you'll find it there. Howard, what got you into theater at the get-go?
Oh gosh, I was interested in theater mostly before I even saw theater. Just the idea of theater interested me. And I saw relatively little theater. My parents took me to see Fiddler on the Roof when I was in second grade. That was a big deal. And then we went as a family, we saw The Magic Show by Stephen Schwartz when it was on Broadway, relatively late in its run. I was probably in about seventh grade at the time, but most of my theater going was self-motivated. It was only once I got into high school and had friends who had cars, or by the time I started to be able to drive, and I was really lucky. I was born in New Haven. We moved to the suburbs when I was 10, and to grow up in and around a small city that had not one but two world-class regional theaters, Yale Rep and Longworth Theater, was just fantastic. And the other great benefit was that because of the Yale School of Drama, and there were students who would have to buy scripts for classwork, but as soon as they were done with them, they would sell them at the used bookstores around the campus. And so by the time I was in high school, I was in those used bookstores every week, and basically anything that was under $1, if it was a script, I would probably buy it. And in fact, I have 2 copies of Our Town that I bought at that time. I'd obviously forgotten that I'd already bought one, yet I have no memory of reading it at that time, which is very strange. But I still have these paperbacks that I bought over 40 years ago. And that's how I started with theater. In terms of working in it, I had a work-study job in a box office when I was in college. I started doing PR my junior year for a new theater company in Philadelphia. I got out of school, went to work 2 summers at the Westport Country Playhouse, a year at Manhattan Theater Club, and in 1985 became the PR director of Hartford Stage. I was believed to be the youngest PR director of a regional theater in the country.
I remember that because I started reporting around 1985, and I think one of the first assignments I had was to cover something at Hartford Stage, and that's how we met.
Yep, we go back, and it's kind of great. I mean, a lot of the people who I met and worked with in the press, actors, directors who I met in those early years, I still work with. And it's great. On the other hand, there's a few people who say, I knew you when you were a kid and still want to treat me like a kid. I'm not a kid.
No, we've all aged gracefully. Now that you've had the experience of writing a book, will you write another one?
I'd like to. I say that hesitantly. I cannot afford to do it the way I did this last one, because books, unless you're Stephen King or someone like that, don't actually make much money. And to have taken a year off from work to do this book is not something I can easily do again. But I have some ideas, and the question is whether there are publishers who are interested in those ideas. And I assume that part of that decision will be what people think of this book and perhaps how well it sells. Again, I don't expect it to be anything close to a bestseller, but I hope it will land in some school libraries, and it will land on the bookshelves of both high school and college educators who are thinking of doing our town. You mentioned that Kate Mcguire has it on her mind. I really hope you mention the book to her. So if she's thinking about the play, I think this book is a way of just opening up more thoughts about what our town can be. It's by no means definitive, and it's by no means prescriptive. It just shows a bunch of ways in, but by no means is it exhaustive.
One of the things I found interesting about our town is the fact that although whether people have seen it or not, they seem to know the play. But unlike other plays that have been adapted to film versions and musicals and this and that, our town really, I think there was one attempt to musicalize it as a musical, and then there was an opera made from it by Ned Rorem, I believe, was the composer. But you would think that something with this kind of universality and theme would have been adapted for a variety of things, and sort of never has.
Well, there was a movie in 1940, shortly after the play closed on Broadway, and it was in its day a success. I urge people to avoid it in general, because although completely with Thornton Wilder's blessing, the ending has changed, and I don't think it's as effective. I also think Our Town is a play that is very much created for the theater. It's very hard to adapt it. In its simplicity, in its directness, a great deal of the play is direct address by this character known as the stage manager. He's talking with the audience. You can't achieve that in other mediums as easily. It was done a whole bunch of times for radio, and it was done a number of times for television. The later television versions are tapings of stage productions, but in 1977, a lot of people our age remember the production that was the version that was done on NBC TV, which very much mirrored what it would be like to see it in the theater, though it was not actually a stage production. But that was the first time Hal Holbrook played the stage manager. So I think it's a hard piece to adapt, because it really truly takes its best form in the theater. There have been 2 musicals, neither of which can even be produced now. The rights are not available. There is the opera by Ned Rorem, which has had some good life. But interestingly, during his lifetime, Thornton Wilder declined to allow an opera to be written from our town, and the person he refused was Aaron Copland. So I think Wilder had an idea of what his play was, and that music is his quote, and I'm paraphrasing slightly, of course, is that my play swears at music, that the play was complete unto itself. It didn't need more. It didn't require elaboration. And very often, even his edict about the first words in the script are no curtain, no scenery. And there are productions that don't take that to heart. It's not that you can't include some, but the moment the physicality of the production overwhelms the spirit and the meaning of the play, you're in trouble. And Wilder, I think, very much knew what he was doing.
Howard, we're out of time, but I want to thank you for joining us. We've been chatting with Howard Sherman, who's the author of Another Day's Begun, Thornton Wilder's Our Town in the 21st Century. I hope you'll write another book, Howard, and come back and talk with us about it on Artsbeat. In the meantime, you can find Howard's book wherever you find your reading sources. Howard, thank you again for joining us. We're going to take a break to acknowledge our underwriters, and we'll be back with more Artsbeat, so don't go away.
Support for community radio on WSKB is provided by Betts Plumbing and Heating Supply Company, an independent, family-owned wholesaler serving Westfield for over 50 years. Specializing in plumbing, heating, and industrial piping supplies. On the web at bettsplumbing.com or at 14 Coleman Avenue in Westfield. Support for the community programming of WSKB is provided by the Dunkin' Donut Shops of Westfield and the Sardinia family. It's nice to know that even as the world changes, Dunkin' Coffee remains the same at 7 convenient locations throughout Westfield. Support for community radio on WSKB is provided by Betts Plumbing and Heating Supply Company, an independent, family-owned wholesaler serving Westfield for over 50 years, specializing in plumbing, heating, and industrial piping supplies. On the web at bettsplumbing.com or at 14 Coleman Avenue in Westfield.
This is Ken Stomsky from Ken's Den on WCPC 15 and 89.5 FM, Tuesdays, 8 to 10.
Community Radio 89.5 WSKB.
Live from Studio 120 at Westfield Technical Academy, this is WCPC Channel 15 and 89.5 FM, WSKB Westfield.
I'm your host, Mark Auerbach. Peter Coles is our chief engineer. And today we're zooming all the way down to Hartford, Connecticut to chat with the good people of TheaterWorks. And on air with us right now is Eric Ort, who's one of the artistic folk at TheaterWorks. And hopefully joining us in a bit will be Taneisha Duggan, his associate. Eric, can you hear us?
I can, Mark.
Good morning. How are you?
Good morning. I am doing very well.
So,
and how are you?
I am doing fine. We're in March, and I know spring is around the corner. Taneisha's supposed to join us, but before she does, why don't you give us a preview of the show that's currently streaming at TheaterWorks called Mr. Parent?
Yeah, I'd be so happy to do that. So, Mr. Parent is a one-man show, and it is an autobiographical piece inspired by the life and stories of Maurice Parent, who is an actor who moved to the Boston area and to basically pay his rent. He took a job as a Boston public school teacher, and the show is his reflections on being a teacher and the tension between trying to be a teacher and being an artist, and what it ultimately really beautifully exposes in the midst of these really funny stories and these heartbreaking stories is really the deep inequities in the American public education system.
Now, I have a question. This is a play that's in development, and is it a streamed reading of the play, or is it a fully produced type of play?
Yeah, so this play is part of what we're calling our workshop series. So it is a play that is still in development, and it will feel very much like a reading of the play. So we've got Maurice is using his script, and it's sitting there on a music stand, just as if you walked into a rehearsal studio, and we've captured that moment.
Yeah, and he didn't write the play, but somebody else wrote his story and directed it. Is that right?
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah, and he tells this story, far better than I do. But it is inspired by his stories, it was written by Melinda Lopez, who's also a Boston-based playwright and actor. And it was conceived and directed by Megan Sandberg-Zekian.
And we've just been joined by Taneisha Duggan. Good morning, Taneisha.
Good morning.
It's good to see you.
You too.
Eric was just filling us in a little bit about Mr. Parent. You guys have really had to completely change course this year in terms of what you had planned to present with the pandemic and not being able to use that beautifully newly renovated theater space on Pearl Street. And you came up with a new concept, and that is of membership, where instead of people subscribing to 6 plays, they took a monthly membership out, and every month TheaterWorks would present something new, whether it was a play in development like Mr. Parent, or it was a play filmed on the stage like Christmas on the Rocks, or the incredible Russian Troll Farm, which really put TheaterWorks on the map nationally, if not internationally. How has it been for both of you navigating the change?
Well, it's been a lot of work doubling our season. Let's just throw that out there. But when we made the decision back in July to not retreat from presenting and in fact expanding our season, I think, and Tia, I hope you'd agree, but I'd love to hear what you have to say. I found it incredibly energizing because all of a sudden we had that many more opportunities to hear from different artists, to get different artists to join our family, to have that many more stories on our stage too.
I definitely, feel like the opportunity that this time of rethinking has given us is a sort of push off the ledge of innovation, right? I think in a lot of ways, both, producing and, as you said, Mark, bringing something like Russian Troll Farm, which has exploded our profile, were things that I think would have been harder to convince ourselves to do a year ago, right? So I think that the kind of freedom that the pandemic and the sort of forced reconsideration of how we do things has been really fruitful for us. And I think part of that is, an agility that's always been a part of TheaterWorks' DNA, from our start, and a willingness to try some things new, but also recognizing, one of the conversations we had early on in July was like, the decision that we make of how we move forward is not just about us, right? And Eric, alluded to, it's not an easy feat to move from 6 projects to something monthly. But it was really important to us to sort of think about how we were supporting and giving a vision and a model to our industry, right? To sort of say, hey guys, we can do this. And it's been really exciting to see other folks come on board, right? Like we were one of the first to say we're going to produce, we're going to make something happen. It's been really exciting to see radio plays and to see the kind of audio work that's really exploded around us. So it's been a gift, a challenge, but I think I'm a parent, so I always look at it through that lens, right? It's like parenting. It's challenging, but there's also a lot of beauty and abundance in doing it.
And you've also had the opportunity to introduce numerous voices and perspectives, from the new plays that are in development to some of the plays that were existing scripts that you've brought to the stage, for, like the Who and the What, so that many new voices that are not getting heard enough or seen enough in theater are getting put out there. In January, you took a pause after the events that took place at the Capitol building to reimagine, rethink, and recharge. What came of that? What new philosophies or new initiatives do you think will come out of that time that you guys sat back and decided to reevaluate where you were going?
I think it's important to sort of frame our pause as a continuation of work we started in the summer. Right? We've been doing anti-racism work, and we've been looking at our impacts since the summer, since the passing of George Floyd, and we, responded to that radically different than our colleagues who took a pause at that moment. We decided to continue on to sort of use that incident as a propeller towards something else. And I think, looking at the events of the 6th and recognizing that everybody was still soldiering on, and we needed also to take some time to really focus in on our anti-racism work. It was an opportunity for us to go, wait, hold on a second. Yes, we had started this work in the summer as a result of George Floyd and our colleagues, our BIPOC colleagues of WCU White American Theater. But let's, as a predominantly white institution, take some time to really look at what the world is looking like around us. Yes, take some time to reflect, right? To take a break to reflect, because it's hard to think outside of your day-to-day tasks of what you're doing. And for us, we're looking at how we do things, right? So much anti-racism work in many places is about looking at things through the lens of Black and brown people, but we are a predominantly white institution. And so for us, it's looking at the ways in which an anti-racist lens actually affects the people that are in our institution. So from things like work-life balance, to the way that we interact with each other, to a kind of transparency and care at how we approach not just each other, but the work. And then, of course, the things that I think people always assume when you say anti-racism work, or you say that is how we're bringing people of different perspectives into what we do intimately, right? Not just in the ways that are the most comfortable, right? Which, this is probably overstating, bringing something to the stage is easier to do. It's easier to bring a BIPOC playwright to our purview than it is to really embed a BIPOC person into the way that we work, right? Into having those bodies and those voices a part of what we do on a daily basis. So that's sort of my expressions of how we came out of the pause. Eric, what's on your mind?
Yeah, I think what I'd fundamentally say is the pause, and it was really so, I think, well named, because it was a recognition that business as usual is a trap, and we had to break that business as usual to have some space to at least begin to reimagine how we can do that business.
Well, let me ask a question. I mean, you're trying, the theater community are trying to make sure that voices are heard, emulating from the stage, that there is a racially sensitive group of creative people on stage, backstage, designing, front of house and all that. And the third component being the audience, making all of this accessible and inclusive to the people that are walking in the door to see the performances, or in this case, clicking to stream the performances. How will you be able to gauge, as you guys are moving forward, the impact of what you're having? Are there benchmarks that you're hoping to meet? Are you looking for anecdotal responses from people? How will you know the work that you're doing is meeting the goals that you guys are setting for yourselves?
So I'm gonna pull you back again, and while yes, the product that we produce and everything that goes around it is the thing that we do, it really starts with the institution and the people inside of it. If we are choosing to really focus on that work, understanding that the off gas of that work will result in more different perspectives coming to the table in terms of selections, different folks feeling welcomed and willing to step in the door. But there's a lot of work. A lot of times institutions rush towards let's pick a bunch of plays that have people of color in it. Let's pick a bunch of playwrights that are people of color or from different backgrounds than the white norm, right? And let's start some initiatives around bringing Black and Brown and differently abled people into the space, right? And those are great tasks, but if they're not rooted in an environment that actually believes in that work and it's not just a checklist, they don't actually last. So we're very honest about the fact that we are at the beginning stages of that you will see quick changes, like, you know, a season like the one we just had where there are a lot of voices, where, you know, something like doing an ASL performance that my dear friend, brother, and colleague Eric Ort, you know, helmed, right? Those kinds of conversations are brand new to us, and those came out of internal work. But I will repeat, it came out of internal work. It wasn't what are we going to do to sort of check off the box that looks and sounds and feels like anti-racism? We go, what are we going to do to be different? And in doing that, the results come from that. Yeah. I know it's not the most satisfying answer, because I think people do want to hear, like, next season we're going to do 6 plays about this, and we're going to, you know, do some events that are about, you know, bringing in other people. But we have also found, having done things like that in the past, we're going to do an event around this kind of person or that kind of community, that it is not an authentic ask, right? That it is not coming from we understand who you are, or want to understand who you are, and so we're inviting you here. You know, we're learning that we have to actually go out to other people, right? That we've got to go into other communities and make ourselves welcome there before we can begin to ask.
Yeah, no, I understand that. And as you're going out there and you're bringing this new vision and working on the vision internally and bringing it forth, how are these potential audiences or new audiences responding that you can tell at this point? I mean, obviously, I haven't seen this Mr. Parent yet, but I've seen just about everything else this year that you've had the opportunity to stream. One thing that you've not sacrificed is a commitment to presenting high quality work, rather than going after the lowest common denominator, saying, well, we can accomplish A, B, and C by putting this play out there. The plays that are being written, even if they're in development, of the highest quality, nothing's been diminished on that level, and nothing's been diminished on the level of making good theater. But how can you tell if you're making the impact on these audiences?
Well, that is the big question, right? I think, well, first of all, thank you for saying that, because we believe deeply in the projects that we're working on this year, and wouldn't be doing them if we didn't believe deeply in them. And I'll also say that one of the benefits of selecting the kinds of projects we have is that the artists that we're working with have brought really wonderful other artists with them to work on the projects too, which is so satisfying and a real gift. But you know, it's to the practical question of, you know, who's watching. It's a challenge in the streaming world to really have a clear sense of that. We do know, and I'll focus for just a moment on what Taneisha made reference to with our beginning ASL streaming, is that's a new community. The deaf community is a new community for us to reach out to. And at least tentatively, anecdotally, we feel like we've made a first step there, and that's incredibly satisfying.
Yeah, because I know that there are occasionally signed performances of live theater, or there were pre-pandemic, but my assumption would be that there's not enough of it, and there's not enough audience development to let people that are hearing impaired know that there are theater opportunities out there for them to try. In the same way that there are other audiences that you're trying to reach, but with the creative work that you're putting on stage, but finding them in the community and reaching out to them and letting them know that you're there is also a challenge in today's media world that doesn't have the space or the time to push out every single project that's happening into every venue. So as things are evolving, the play on stage now is Mr. Parent. What are some of the other things that are in development that you can talk about at this point?
Well, one of the projects, and since I'm jumping in, we're not talking chronologically. In our workshop series, the final piece in our workshop series is a play that is called Moonlighters, and we're very happy to be part of the developmental process of that. It's written by a Hartford playwright, Sin Martinez, and Taneisha really brought her to our attention, and we're really thrilled about that. It's a futuristic workplace comedy, and this one is really in its early stages relative to the other ones we've done so far. And we're really excited about the chance to give a playwright to not only make space, but try and make resources available to her to develop the piece.
Yeah, let me ask Taneisha, direct a question to Taneisha. This workshop series where the plays are in development, that you're finding these scripts or artists that have this potential to have a play produced, and you're doing a reading of the play. What happens after for example, Mr. Parent? After Mr. Parent ends its run at TheaterWorks, what happens next?
That's a good question. I'm actually going to answer that question not talking about Mr. Parent, but talking about another workshop project that we're doing, just called Proximity by Harrison David Rivers, which is the first commission that we've, official commission. We have worked with playwrights and
explain what a commission is.
Yes, I will. So we have worked with playwrights in the past before on new works, but we've never properly commissioned a playwright, which basically means I'm asking you, Mr. or Ms. Playwright, to write a play for our theater, and we will be the first to have the opportunity to produce it as a full production. We will be the first. We will have the opportunity to produce it as a world premiere, and that's the first time we've done this kind of formally. And that's Harrison David Rivers, and we're really excited by that. And I think the hope is, again, this is our first commission, so we'll see how it goes. But I think our hope with the workshops is, one, to give artists an opportunity, a home, a place of refuge and a moment to work on pieces that they're really interested in working on. And I think there is a hope on our end that these are projects that we can produce more fully in the future. We talked a lot about recession planning. A lot of theaters coming out of 2008 sort of made some choices about what projects they were going to produce, and they were mostly tied to big names or Broadway projects. And I think for us, the workshop series really offers us an opportunity to kick it old school, to sort of do things the way regional theaters used to do things, which is that we were the incubators of our region's best talent, and those projects that were really extraordinary moved to Broadway, as opposed to the way that the train had been moving since the recession, which is that Broadway projects would come back to regional stages to give that market a chance to see something that they might not travel to New York for. I don't think that is leaving altogether from regional theater stages, but I do think this opportunity to really cultivate and nurture and support both the artists that are in our markets and also artists that we're really excited by and want to build relationship with and hopefully bring stories to our audiences that they may not see otherwise is a different way of working. Is like I said, we're kicking it old school. We're going back to the roots of regional theater, and that's really exciting for us.
So you commission this play and it gets performed maybe in a workshop. What happens after that? Does it go back to the drawing boards and get revamped based upon the reaction that the audiences have? Is it possible that you might produce it or another theater might produce it? Is there, what happens to it?
So that's the thing about a commission, is that the commission, when you commission, you have the right of first refusal on a project. So you get to say after the workshop reading, yes, I want to continue to develop and support this project with the goal of bringing it to the stage. And what that means from the workshop reading to the stage could be really different depending on the play and the playwright. It could be, yes, I learned a lot of things in that workshop, and so I want to go back and rewrite. It could be, this play is exactly where I want it to be. The next phase is understanding how it lives in 3D. That next step is really individual. But the commission thing, the thing that's really specific about a commission is that the theater that commissions the work gets the opportunity to decide first whether or not they're going to put it on the stage. And that's cool, because sometimes, you know, some of the works that we're doing in workshop are not commissioned. So the work that we have, you know, given artists space for could very well show up on stage in another place. So it's nice when you're providing resource to be able to bring it to full fruition. But yeah, you know, for us, it's a combination of many things. It's about just leaving space to let people do what they need to do, and then sometimes it's commission with the goal of putting it on the stage in the next season or two.
How long does it take for a commission? You talk to a playwright and you say, we'd like to have you do a play, and how long does it take from that point to the point that it might be ready for its first workshop production? Is it something that happens quickly, or does it depend on the particular play?
I think it depends on the particular institution and the playwright, but most often a commission is within a year, right? We started this conversation with Harrison back in the fall. Our first workshop read will be in April. So that's a pretty quick turnaround for a first draft. But I think, like everybody, you know, everybody works best around a deadline. So sometimes, you know, the seed of the idea of I want to work with you is planted long before, you know, you decide you're gonna put a workshop date on the calendar. But yeah, for us, it was the fall to the spring, so a little over half a year.
That's terrific. Did somebody help you fund this commission, or did you? Will this be in the future? If you want to commission a work, do you have to go out and find the money first to commission, or do you find the play first and then go after the funders? How does that work?
So in our case, we built it into our budget this year. So there's no, you know, funder of the commission per se, but Bank of America is a sponsor of our workshop series. So they sponsor all of these projects for this year. But now, this is Taneisha now talking, not Taneisha as an avatar of TheaterWorks, but Taneisha as her own administrator and artist. I think there's something really important about theaters beginning to think about working as social enterprises and not as nonprofits. Social enterprise being a for-profit model that is mission-based. And I say that because, you know, you may be less willing to go out and commission a playwright if you have to go find the funder to support it first. And I think it's really important for theaters, not just TheaterWorks, but theaters around the country, to really re-engage with the importance of commissioning work as a core piece of our business, and figuring out how your economic models work to support that, whether it's through ticket sales, whether it's through other activities that you do to fund it. It's really important to me to sort of engage in the conversation around, this is what we do. This is the widget we make plays, right? And so we need to make it a part of our value system, which comes out of what we budget for, that says this is really important, that bringing a play to life from its birth to its final real life production is important to us. So I encourage theaters, as hard as it is, but there's no time like now to really consider your economic model and go, okay, this is really important to me. This is what we're going to do. And whatever funders come to your organization as a part of what you do is fantastic, but you're not holding hostage commissioning to, you know, some big corporation or private funder to give you the means to do so.
We've only got a couple of minutes here, so Eric, we'll let you give us a quick update of what's coming in the next month or so, and this membership model. If somebody wants to become a member or learn more about TheaterWorks, how do they do that?
Absolutely. Well, let's start with that. If somebody wants to become a member of TheaterWorks, they can, of course, go to our website, which is twhartford.org, and there's the opportunity to get a membership. I think there's still an opportunity to get grab the whole rest of our season. I think that's still there. Certainly, you could call our box office, and they will work something out with you, or buy month by month membership. And so that's your resource there. The exciting thing is there are a bunch of plays to watch, starting right now with Mr. Parent, which begins this Sunday. We're also, by virtue of the fact that we were to have produced Fun Home this year, but unfortunately the rights for streaming it were pulled from us because they're planning a film. We were able to pivot with one of our partners for Russian Troll Farm and present their production of Schoolgirls, or the African Mean Girl play, which is being produced by Theater Squared in Fayetteville, Arkansas. And so that is open to our members. Immediately after that, we are streaming The Sound Inside, which just wrapped filming in our space, live and in person with no audience. And that will stream in April. In May, we will have the Proximity Workshop streaming. In June, we'll have the workshop of Moonlighters. In late July, we're sort of doubling up our July, what would have been our July stream in August. And we've got two shows there. A play called Walden, which is in its regional premiere at TheaterWorks. And
Mark, you have to have us come back because we've got some exciting news to share about that one that we can't share today.
We're out of time, but folks, go to twhartford.org to learn more about TheaterWorks. Taneisha Duggan and Eric Ort, thanks for joining us today. And thanks also for joining us on short notice, because the two of our great TheaterWorks friends came on board last minute when somebody else had to cancel. I'm so appreciative of that. And I will have you on again in the spring because there's so much going on at TheaterWorks that we need to let people know about. And that wraps up this week's edition of Artsbeat TV and Radio here on Westfield Community Programming Channel 15 and 89.5 FM WSKB. I'm your host, Mark Auerbach. Peter Coles has been our chief engineer. We'll see you next week on another edition of Artsbeat.
Today is the day your son becomes a man, Papa. Today he claims a mate and joins the clan, Papa. Or that's what you'd expect from any son who walks erect. Well, I'm sorry, but I've got a different plan, Papa. I'm not like the other cavemen. Mother Nature gave men a brain, but for most of them it's all in vain. They got no reason or rhyme. Undeniably, I'm way ahead of my time. Remember when you took me hunting for mastodon? How at first I nearly fainted, then I hurried home and painted. People saw my sketch and learned the story and passed it on, 'cause it was plastered on the wall for the glory of us all. With a spear in hand, I fear I'm ineffectual, but I might just be the world's first Homo sapien who's an intellectual. I'm not like the other cavemen. All the gruff and grave men I greet like to hunt and grunt and eat raw meat. Ugh, they seem at home in the grime. Undeniably, I'm way ahead of my time. Remember when the days were chilly and Pleistocene? How you made me those pajamas from the skins of woolly mammoths. Only nowadays it's not so frozen and nice to see. It might be nice to see new clothes in a style that I'll propose. Now you know I'd never put myself in jeopardy, but I swear that I would kill for something sleek and leopardy. 'Cause I'm not like the other cavemen. Can't you see I crave many things that a lowbrow lifestyle never brings? No chance for something sublime. Undeniably I'm way ahead of my time. Oh please, I'm sick of all these dances with that ooga booga crap. If I could only show you all the steps I got on tap, just watch me. Oh, see me shine, Papa. Ooh, I'm on fire. I'll tell you what fire is later. Take it home. I'm not like the other cavemen. Virtuous and brave men, no doubt, but the kind that I could do without. They got no reason or rhyme. Undeniably, I'm gonna have to say, Pa, can't you see I'm way ahead of my time?